Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Miriam Benavides, and I will be your moderator for this afternoon's Brown Bag, Inclusive Hiring and Retention Practices for the Affordable Housing Industry, a toolkit for promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion. I am the Chief People Officer of Satellite Affordable Housing Associates, or SAHA, and I'm based out of Berkeley, California. I've worked in the affordable housing industry for over 20 years, working over the last 5+ with NPH on DEI efforts, and I also serve on the board of NPH. Bring up the agenda for today's session. There's the agenda. Here we'll do a report overview, a case study, and we'll have a roundtable discussion. Today's panelists and presenters include a blend of SCAMP and NPH members. Today you'll hear from Denise Switt, Vice President of Real Estate Development at EAH Housing, Rainey Dare, Bay Area Regional Director of Real Estate at Mercy Housing, California, Rochelle Mills, CEO of Innovative Housing Opportunities, and Mick Penn, Northern California Regional Community Relations Director at Swinderton. Whew, that was a mouthful. Rainey will actually share a brief overview of Mercy's real estate growth assessment tool, which is actually featured in the report, and how Mercy uses it to promote growth and staff retention. We'll also hold some space for the audience Q&A at the end of the session. So please feel free to send any questions in to the Q&A toolbox, and we'll do our best to answer all of your questions. However, before we hear from these folks, let me share some background on the report. The genesis of the report was driven by staff at NPH and SCAMP, who sought ways to collaborate and amplify each organization's efforts around DEI. The staff of NPH and SCAMP agreed to partner on the report by co-writing it, soliciting significant feedback from their respective members, committees, and executive leadership to inform content. Staff spent several months formulating ideas around which topics to include, research, and writing the final report. Depending on where your organization is and its DEI journey, this report can create a meaningful starting point for housers. For others further along, it's a tool you can use to examine against your current practices. Overall, it highlights strategies in implementing inclusive hiring practices, ways in which DEI can contribute towards retention and staff satisfaction. There are interviewing and onboarding tips for hiring managers, and even the most seasoned interviewer and leader can benefit from them. Something I also want to highlight is how the report reflects an organizational mindset of how organizations can best approach this work to make progress against their DEI efforts, and how this DEI work should belong to everyone within an organization, not just HR or DEI leaders. So now let me hand it off to two of the report's contributing writers for a more in-depth report overview. Today from NPH, we have Izani Levned, NPH's Racial Equity Inclusion Program Manager, and from SCAMP Advocacy Manager, Ariana Jukes. So Ariana, I'll hand it off to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Miriam. A quick housekeeping before we jump into the details of the report. This will be recorded as usual and will be sent out to everyone at the end. We're also going to send out the slides and another link to the report just in case you haven't seen it. Any questions that you have, please put in the Q&A box at the bottom. And at the end of our presentation and panel, we'll get to those questions. So we're short on time. There's a lot of good information in the report. So thank you, Miriam, for giving that great highlighting. But as Miriam mentioned, we combined surveys, research, and case studies to really create a comprehensive look into the best practices to create an inclusive environment and organizational workspace. So I first want to give some highlights about the survey that SCAMP conducted in late 2022, looking at the last 3 years, so 2019 to 2022, what were the efforts that organizations in our membership took? What actions did they take to infuse DEI work into their organizational structures? So we're seeing, 40% did a DEI survey, 52% conducted cultural competency trainings, 60% included an emphasis of DEI work into their strategic plan and budgeting. And we're seeing the impacts of that, right? So within those 3 years, or even, from 2022, we're seeing groups reporting that their leadership is more diverse than 3 years ago, that 83% of respondents say that they dedicate specific resources to diverse recruitment, and that 87% of respondents say that their organizations prioritize diverse populations, their boards prioritize diverse populations. And while we have we've made those strides, on the other hand, we're still seeing this overall issue when it comes to hiring and retention in general, right? 3.4 out of 5 groups have indicated strong difficulty with retention, and 4 out of 5 groups have indicated very strong difficulty to find talent. So the question remains, how do we effectively meld our DEI practices into a successful and inclusive hiring and retention strategies? So I'm going to talk about the hiring process, and Izani will take it off with the retention. But the key to start off before any of this is making sure you have strong organizational accountability. And Rami will talk about what that actually looks like in practice, but it really is talking about intentional commitment. This isn't just checking off boxes, right? It's making sure that you have manager buy-in and a shared vision. And it's not just one department's job. It's not just HR to come up with these metrics. It's not the DEI department to only be responsible for this work. It needs to be infused in everyone's position and role, especially since we work in mission-driven work, right? Using data and metrics, assessing where you are and where you want to go, and making sure you're reviewing that constantly. And then finally, managing expectations. Uprooting structural racism and how it is infused into our workplace culture does not happen overnight. So setting small incremental goals while constantly doing that self-evaluation work as a team will be really helpful in making sure that you're reaching those goals in an effective way. So how do we do inclusive hiring, and what is inclusive hiring? It's going beyond the DEI metrics that I was discussing, and actually focusing on creating a level playing field for all who apply. So that looks like writing inclusive job descriptions, staying away from coded language. And what coded language is words that elicit a response subconsciously or consciously within people when they're reading it. So using gendered language like aggressive or dominant will usually, studies show, will prevent women from applying, and vice versa when you're using language that is typically feminine, like cooperation, support. These are words that just are eliciting a response in people whether or not they know it. And you really want to make sure that you stay away from racially coded language. And one of the research things we were talking about, they're like, don't use the word ninja for Excel spreadsheet. Like, yes, that makes complete sense. If you are hiring, send to a diverse pool. Stop just going within your networks, making sure that you're targeting, African-American student unions on campuses, making sure you're reaching out to Latino business alliances. In our report, we have a lot of examples of places to send to. And then finally, you want to reduce unconscious bias. And unconscious bias are those illicit biases we all hold that we have no idea are interacting when we're doing our work. And so one key of doing that, going blind with the resume, getting rid of the names on the resume. As a 2021 study with the National Bureau of Economic Research found that individuals with distinctly Black names were 10% less likely to receive callbacks for job applications, despite having the same qualifications listed on resumes with white sounding names. This is still happening in our daily interactions. Make sure you ask for a work sample. Work samples are great indicators of future performance, and it allows hiring teams to look past the qualifications and all the stories we pull from resumes. And it allows to really see what someone's work ethic will be like. And then finally, you want to set the interviewee up for success. If you're doing an online interview, give them tips on lighting, what to wear, how to set up their computer and like what if they need to download a program beforehand. This is really key. And then finally, making sure that you standardize questions across interviews. You're not asking them about their experience per se, but rather how would they approach a certain situation when they would be in your office. And so those are just some key parts of the hiring process, and the report has a lot more, but I'm going to pass it off to Zani to talk more about retention strategies.
Thank you, Ariana. Let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, are we good to go?
Yes.
Oh, great. So yeah, thank you for giving that introduction on the hiring side. As Ariana mentioned, the MPHDEI hiring and retention subcommittee worked on the retention strategies, and they used a good chunk of their time, during our planning meetings for over a year to come up with some really great strategies that they've seen success at their organizations, and also like really innovative ideas to consider. And so we also just, want to remind everyone that this is not a one size fits all, but this report is like really intended to inspire you all to think about more ways that you can retain, your talented staff. So we'll go ahead and share a few of the report highlights. To start off with staff satisfaction surveys, these are a great way to assess how staff across the organization and at varying leadership positions experience the organization. And so making staff satisfaction surveying process like an integrated into your organization by creating like consistent feedback loops ensures that the staff will know that they're being heard and that you're practicing retention strategies that meet the needs of your team. And this report also includes some surveying platforms that could be a useful tool. Some other highlights to share are the internal organizational advancement plans, as well as professional development and mentorship opportunities. These strategies not only show that you want to invest in your staff, but that you're going to also be providing the tools and resources through professional development opportunities and mentorship opportunities to make them be the most successful person that they can be. And then I will close out the retention report highlights by sharing some compensation, creative, I will say, compensation benefits packages. Some that I want to highlight in this section are the medical and family planning, the childcare spending, tuition reimbursement, cost of living adjustment, as well as the staff development and well-being stipends. These were, highlighted through the group as like things that really encourage the staff to want to continue working and feeling valued at their organization. In terms of employee resource and affinity groups, these are great resources that allow for staff to dialogue and connect with those who have shared identities as them. And this could look like shared ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender, or even leadership position. And we found that knowing that there's support behind from the organization to host these meetings makes staff feel like they have safe spaces to connect with the other members of their organization. And so now I'll pass it over to Rami to talk about Mercy's RECAT strategy.
You're muted, Rami.
Thank you for reminding me to turn on my mic. Thanks everyone in advance for dealing with my voice today, which is wobbly just in time for this webinar. So I'm with Mercy Housing. We're actually a national organization, and I'm in one of the California offices. We do work statewide and have about 11,000 units or apartments, homes that we've created in the state for families, seniors, and people with special needs. So I'm in the real estate team, and we also have property management, resident services, and asset management. The tool that I'm going to share with you today was developed by the real estate team probably a couple years ago to address one of the things that was in Azani's highlights, which is having some transparent, very clear internal ladder. And so you can go to the next slide. So we created this real estate growth assessment tool, which we call the REGAT. And what we wanted to do was not rely solely on our annual performance review, which is what was based on like how are we as employees addressing Mercy's values, which are mercy, justice, and respect, as well as our performance on actual goals that we had for the year. But it didn't seem very as specific as we needed it to be. And so we spent 6 months creating this tool to specify what the real estate development work is. And we broke it down for the various positions that we have in our department, which range from an entry-level assistant project manager to an associate director of real estate, which is basically directing a group of staff within the department. And we were able to create a tool that had very specific skills and learning that are achieved in about 10 categories that are listed here. And the way that staff can achieve those is a combination of actually working on projects or assignments, attending trainings, shadowing folks, touring and participating in a team. So we try to broaden the way that folks can actually achieve the different levels in the REGAT. And then part of the REGAT is to not only like say, oh, what did you do? And that's it, but really look at how can you grow here at Mercy Housing? And so we encourage staff and their supervisor to talk often about like, what else would you like to do here on this REGAT or achieve on this REGAT? And how can we give you some assignments or some opportunities to do that? You can go to the next slide. So this is just a summary. I'm going to show you little snippets of the REGAT because it's kind of a big tool, so I can't show the whole thing, but just to give you a flavor, this is a summary of those 10 categories that I mentioned before. And for each of these 10 categories, there are very detailed specifics about the different levels of skills and accomplishments. And what we do is we go through each of those, and then it rolls up into this kind of tally. And we use this to look at how are people doing against the kind of maximum, and the maximum is 39 points, I guess you could say. And each position in our department has a number that people hit in order to get promoted. Please go to the next slide. Thank you. So this is a little snippet of one of the specifics. So under the category of consultants and due diligence, we basically have 3 descriptions of what the competency level is for the staff person who is using this tool. And we really just have 3 levels: beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And then the little box below it shows you kind of what our expectation is for what level should you be at if you want to reach a certain position. So PM1, which is project manager 1, it's entry-level project manager and someone who has maybe a couple years of experience, project management experience. PM1 should be at an intermediate level for the consultant due diligence category, for example. You can go to the next slide. And so after we go through the REGAT together with our staff, then what we do is we create some sort of growth plan for them to embark on for the year. And this just gives you kind of a sense of what that template looks like. And it looks different for everybody. And it may be like, oh, you're going to, now we know you really want more experience with funding programs. So we're going to give you some funding applications to work on, or we're going to have you join this training about bonds and credits, or, so it kind of prompts the thinking about like, how do we make sure that you're continuing to grow as you stay here at Mercy? you can go to the next slide. Oh, skip that one. Okay, this one has the picture. So in addition to the tool, which can be very, very specific, we also want to pay attention to the culture of our department. So we really work hard at making sure that we express a culture of learning and humility at all levels, and a team and collaboration. And so that is in our way we talk and the way we ask people to work together. We have organized ourselves into pods because our team is about 22 people. So you can kind of get lost in a group of 22, but if you're in a pod, which is anywhere from 3 to 5 or 6 people, you're part of something that you can hold on to. But and you work together as a pod, but we also ask people to work outside of their pod with other team members or other pod members, so that they can advance on those growth areas that we were talking about on the regat, but also get to work with each other. So we do that a lot, and we coordinate a lot on that amongst our leadership. As I mentioned, we want to make sure that we provide assignments to expand their learning and their experience, and it's tied to the regat, but it's also tied to what staff express an interest in and what they see is kind of maybe missing, because we're not going to catch everything. And we do it through a combination of trainings that we organize amongst ourselves. Maybe someone who is pretty senior can sit down, which Mike has done, for example. He has done some pro forma trainings, like this is a basic pro forma. Let me walk you through it so you can kind of understand, because that kind of training may not be offered very easily. So we do a combination of internal trainings as well as by outside trainings. And then of course we try our best to apply to every partner program that is available and that can allow folks to have an external source of learning, but also a peer group through that partner program. And then one thing that we're going to try to implement next year is to create cohorts of staff that are working together on similar milestones. So what we've noticed is that we have a lot of staff that are working on construction projects, and because they're in their pods, they're not talking to each other. So we're going to put a cohort together of everyone who's working on something that's in construction so they can start comparing notes and learning from each other and best practices, and also just like have a support group. And then we're going to continue having people shadow. We do site tours of our own properties with asset management and property management and resident services. And then we have conocimientos, which is started as a practice of staff individually introducing themselves and sharing about themselves to each other, but now we're doing it at a project level. So they're introducing their projects to each other. So that is our little story here at Mercy Housing, and I will turn it over to the next person.
Thank you, Rami, for sharing Mercy's regat tool. I'm sure I see questions in the chat already about it, so we'll get to that after our panel discussion. Now we'll jump into our panel discussion. Again, we have Denise Wint from EAH, Nick Penn from Swinderton, give a little wave, Rochelle Mills from Innovative Housing Opportunities. Okay, so we'll jump in. So for the next 30 minutes, as we said at the top of the hour, we'll talk about some opportunities and barriers you all have had experience in within your respective organizations. So I'm just going to jump into some questions here. All right. So Rochelle, I'll ask if you can kick us off here. What are successful hiring strategies your organization has deployed to attract diverse staff? And where do you feel like you've fallen short?
Fortunate that we just, I think because the leadership is people of color, we attract people of color. We're also very much engaged in organizations that reflect the diversity of our staff. So we tend to, just by natural osmosis, attract people. I would say if you're not, I always joke with my colleagues when they say, we just don't know. We don't know where they are. And I think, well, they won't come to you. You know, you got to go to them. There are so many organizations that exist. Black Developers Forum, African American real estate professionals, Real, so many organizations. So we tend to circulate in that group, and people will come to us. If things haven't worked well, I won't say things haven't worked well. We've had very good response. And because people know that we will take care of our staff, folks will call me when they know that a staff member is ready to move on, or they've got an intern that's ready to move on. And they'll reach out to me and say, Rochelle, we'd love to know, do you have space on your staff? So I know people are looking for people who will nurture their team. And it does take a little bit of nurturing. It's hard to say that it is specific to people of color, but there's so few of us that it does take a little bit of nurturing. You get so many stupid questions and stupid comments from people that people are a little gun shy. So they go where they know that they won't be made to feel awkward. And I don't think it's intentional, but so we've done really well with that. If there's anything that I say is a negative, it is because people know that we are going to take good care of our people, that we are easily targets for other people to poach. And that just comes with the territory.
Mhm. Okay, thank you, Rochelle. Denise? Do you wanna take a stab at that as well?
Sure. Thank you, Rochelle, for your feedback to that question. I could add that similar to Rochelle, we do get a lot of questions about opportunities to work at EAH. I think our communications team has been doing a really great job making sure that our name is out there and we're visible, so people get to see how active the organization is. And then also because we represent the states of California and Hawaii in very diverse geographic regions, it requires having a diverse team. I mean, our team within our real estate development team specifically, I mean, we have so many different backgrounds, whether they've had lived experience, they've lived in or grew up in public housing, or they grew up in affordable housing tax credits. They come from living in a single family home, or they're first generation American, or first time, the first person in their family or the first gen attending college. So all of these lived experiences are able to come and have a unique aspect and contribution to the projects and in the communities that we develop in. And so with our recruitment team, I do appreciate our HR team, because we are all learning ways of being able to improve our DEI efforts and how we do outreach and engagement, not only waiting. So it's not necessarily waiting for the phone calls to come, but they are out there actively engaging and attending or providing hiring fairs at our different communities, or going to the local college, whether it's at a trade school or a university. We participate in and have and host interns. So whether it's through the Bay Area Housing Internship Program, or the LISC Housing Internship Program in Los Angeles, or the the CCRH with the Rural Housing Agency, we do find ourselves positioned in different segments of our respective states to be able to ensure that there are more individuals included. And again, that's specifically to our real estate development team. We have, 700 individuals that work with EAH and within property management or asset management in different parts of our organization. There is that intentionality about improving ways for our DEI efforts. We even have a song that one of our resident services and IT
teammates had created about DEI, and he created on his own, and he put a great music video together, and we share it at some of our events. And so again, it's being able to include so many people from within our organization that want to be involved. So I do appreciate that.
Wow, a song. That's awesome. I don't know, Mick, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, no,
Song, tough act to follow with the song.
yeah, we don't have a song, you know, but we'll work on that, Denise. Yeah, so really excited to be here today. So I guess I represent that little construction trailer or big construction trailer or the office around the corner of the folks that are building your building, right? And supporting the housers and bringing the affordable units online. But I think for us, so the construction industry historically has been, you know, predominantly white, predominantly male. I know when I began this work, you know, probably 15 years ago, you know, it has changed since then. And I think, you know, here at Swinnerton, one of the keys, I think, to the changing and expansion of folks that, you know, I'm just going to call underrepresented in the sense of there's not many of them, you know, within the industry, has really been our, you know, our women in construction effort, right? You know, the women in construction effort has really kind of led the way, I think, for diversifying and creating, you know, opportunities for other folks. Um, you know, we have, you know, had that ongoing, you know, well before I was here. But also, I think, you know, so I'm on our national recruiting team. So I support our efforts with our historically Black colleges and universities, and then also focused on regional recruiting and trying to partner with organizations like NSBE, which is National Society of Black Engineers, SWE, Society of Women Engineers, and SHIP, Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, and organizations like that, you know, supporting their career fairs. I think what we strive for as a company is to have our staff represent the communities that we're working in, right? So thinking about the Bay Area, and that's a baseline, right? You know, to have levels of diversity. One of the exciting things is, like I said, I began this work 15 years ago, and I don't think I ever saw a project manager, right, that was a woman. And I went to multiple job sites supporting the old redevelopment agency and was shocked when I saw my first one. I was like, wow, you know, this is probably 2010, you know, and then her boss was Black. I was even double shocked. And so, you know, one of the nice things about where the industry now is that, you know, I think on the projects that I work with, and I really support our efforts around affordable housing and those projects. Th- the leadership of those teams are either women or LGBTQ plus identified folks. So in a lot of ways, the industry has continued. I think for us, the recruitment effort has to be intentional. It's not going to happen by accident. You know, we have to actively be seeking out women, people of color, LGBTQ plus identified folks, and bringing them into the industry. And then I think one of our shortfalls, though, and I'll wrap it up really, is probably having our population reflect the African American population in the Bay Area. And, you know, some of that is systemic in the sense of folks that are going into the engineering or construction management programs, um, that, you know, as far as available pool, but we can't accept that as, you know, oh, we can't do it, you know, we can't. And so we got to think creatively about really trying to get, you know, more African American men and more African American women, you know, involved within the construction industry on both sides, the administrative side and the craft side.
Thank you, Mick. I'm also hearing a lot of resources being shot out from you all, so maybe there's a way we can pull them and share them with folks who are interested. Okay, moving on. So the report highlights barriers to upholding and achieving DEI efforts. And the same can be said around staff retention. So can you all talk about some barriers or obstacles to staff retention that you've encountered and how you've addressed them?
I'll go ahead and take that.
Sure.
Start from the front to the back, back to the front. I think with staff retention, the way that most of our team spends their day is, when I'm thinking about Swinnerton builders in Northern California, is on a project, right? And the project can be a bit isolating for the team, and in a lot of ways, fortunate our teams are fairly diverse, but I could see an individual just feeling isolated and sort. So one of the things that we have developed, and I saw Izani had that as one of the recommendations, is our employee resource groups. We have a Black community employee resource group, Latinx resource group, AAPI resource group, Pride resource group, veterans, working parents. So we have a lot of resource groups, and I think they have done wonders with regards to allowing somebody that may be in a remote setting, maybe working on Denise's project in Greenfield, where they're commuting in and able to connect with folks. And the way we set our resource groups up is it's the affinity and allies, right? And so a community that's set up to really support you and support your success. I think another piece to our retention is our we have two mentoring programs. We have kind of an internal mentor program, kind of pair you with somebody as far as your professional development, but we also have an affinity internship program, at least with our Black community business resource group, to connect a Black employee with another Black employee, so that you can bounce questions and solutions, and really be able to, hopefully in that space, bring 100% of your authentic self, to and seek support. And usually it's tiered like that, someone that's a little more senior than the person that is the mentee. But I think that creating the community for folks to plug into, and creating support networks around people for their success are a couple of things that we're doing to break down the barriers for retention.
Thank you so much, Nick.
I could say this for IHO. We're a small organization. There's only about 10 of us at any given point. And a few years ago, I remember saying to some colleagues, what do I do about the staff turnover? After a few years, they turn over, and they said to me something that really stuck. And they said, employees stay with you 2 years, maybe 3. If they stay longer than that, consider yourself fortunate. But the nature of the work that we do, it is always changing. It is always growing. This right now is a seller's market. So employees, if they are competent and creative, they're going to be sought after. And so we take a little bit of a different approach. Our job is to invest in our employees the same way we invest in our real estate, to help them grow so that wherever they move next, they become an extension of IHO. Sometimes they leave before we're ready for them to go. Sometimes they stay a little bit longer than we'd like them to stay. But the beauty is, if we have invested in them and they have invested in us, when they move, it is a win-win. And so, I take great pride when I see our staff move into roles where they can stretch and they can share some of what I believe were great vision and attributes that we poured into them, and they can share that. And so, people will say all the time, are you sad that they're leaving? I really feel when they give you 100% and you've given them 100%, our job is to help them launch, just like we want to launch our residents. So retention, I don't worry about that so much. I just want to make sure that we are investing in them so that during the time that we have them, that we can be as effective together as we can be.
Thank you.
And I could say, so it's an interesting space to be in. A couple years ago, it was a real concern about staff retention because folks were busy, had a lot of projects and wanting to pick experienced individuals to work on your projects. And so I say it's a different space now, but just working internally, again, it's just something that is intentional, at least specifically for me, with our team. And it's, are they getting the adequate training that's necessary to push training and professional development across the board? Are they getting exposed to the various aspects of the development process? And I'm only speaking to the real estate development team.
Mhm.
Now, are they being exposed, especially with, and how can we grow our newer staff, the ones who came in some cases as an intern, and making sure that they can see the various aspects of a development deal, because they may not have 10 years to wait for, or 5 years for one deal to advance in order for them to get that real experience. And so I often share is that I want you to be in a position, whether you're an intern or a senior project manager, is to build your resume. So if and when you do leave, you have that foundation established. You know how to be confident and defend your numbers when it comes to the pro forma. You know how to properly write and present to the board. So it's just taking a lot of these things into consideration. So understanding our team's strengths and weaknesses. I suggest, like, if you know you're the more technical person on our team, and you are not the one that wants to get out and talk to people, pair yourself with that individual who likes to get out and talk to people who may not have as much technical capacity, and see how you guys could be a support to each other instead of me being the one that's pushing, like, you need to improve in this and you need to improve in this. So it's an interesting balance for us to be in, because we have a lot of projects and our team has a lot of projects that they are working on. So it's constant, that constant balance that I'm facing with, okay, how is your mental space? Are you healthy? Because I've shared with a couple of our teammates, like, your position could be replaced. I cannot replace you. And so it's like, we want you to take initiative, which we appreciate. Let me know when it's too much, because we want to be able to pull back. And so I think the way we've been able to respond with that is just having that open dialogue, constant check-in with our HR team to make sure that there is pay equity. They do a really good job in ensuring that. HR also has our files reviewed to make sure that we aren't underperforming in any particular capacity where it comes to our hiring practices. So a lot of these things are taken into consideration and a way to be able to respond. It is a difficult space to be in. It is very tough to lose staff. I feel like I have a special connection with some of them or a lot of them. But again, I got to be able to know that, yes, this person is moving on to bigger and better things, and I could encourage that.
Thank you, Denise. I know some folks in your HR team, so shout them out. You have a great HR team over there at EAH. Okay, so moving on. As a leader of color, something I've experienced and honestly struggled with over the years is just the tremendous amount of weight sometimes that I feel around the successes of my organization's DEI plans and our failures. Assuming that some of you may have felt that heaviness, that weight at one time or another, what strategies have your organizations engaged in to spread the responsibility around DEI work so that it doesn't solely fall on people of color to carry the work within the organization? And if you can also share any methods, self-care, otherwise, any resources that you use to sustain your commitment to this work. Anyone want to start? I'll just call on someone. Mick? There you go.
Yeah, quick draw. So I think, the construction industry's different. Okay. We're, in support, in alignment with getting the projects done. I think for many of us, folks of color that are in this industry, the pivot point was really the George Floyd summer, right? And as somebody that had worked, predominantly for a couple of general contractors on external diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think at that moment, across the industry, there was an internal look at what we're doing, right? And unfortunately, well, fortunately, like the responsibility falls to me, right? And the leaders of our Latinx BRG and the leaders of our AAPI BRG or Business Resource Group, it has fallen. And I've talked to some of my colleagues, support all our BRGs, and they talk about that weight. But for me personally, I have treasured this moment to begin to move the industry forward, right? And to really be able to kind of um, do some things we weren't really even thinking about, right? I was focused on small businesses and getting folks into the construction trades. Me personally within our organization have kind of relished the opportunity to push these initiatives. I'm sure at a certain point in time, it probably will get a little tiring, and hopefully at that point in time we'll groom the next person. But I do also think that the way we've set up our business resource groups, the allyship, and looking to allies to support either through some financial means or some sweat equity, has kind of helped move some of the initiatives along. But um, it for me, it's just been a revelation within the construction industry over the last 3 or 4 years. What we're doing now, and then self care. I do like a nice Cabernet. So if somebody wants to send me one, reach out to me.
Well, it's interesting. I will say, Miriam, that I take that responsibility. I take it on intentionally as a leader of an organization that's only 10 people. Who else? The vision is set and the tone is set at the top. And so I take very seriously, but I will go so far as if you look at this image behind me, when I get our drawings done by our architects, I'm the one that has to remind them there are no Black people. We're the Black people. We're in a Latino neighborhood. Where are the Latinos? It's funny because when I first started doing that, it was considered nitpicky. Now I can at least trust that my staff will say, "Oh, Rochelle's not going to be happy. There's no old people in this image. You better get those old people in it." And I really believe that is our job. People don't see it, not as a matter of colonialism or whatever. They're just, everybody is in their own head. It is our job to make sure that people realize when you send me out with your architectural drawings to a senior property and everybody's 30 something and there's Porsches and Teslas, you just lost the project for us. And so that kind of eye is ours to have. Now, what I will also do, because I do think it matters, I mentioned to a couple people a few days ago, I am fortunate to be married to a white male. So I see from his eyes, he sees from my eyes. And he will say to me sometimes, does it really matter? Do you really have to see it to be it? Yes, you do. Now, not everybody, but yes, you do. And I noticed the difference in coaching when I had a white coach versus a Black coach. A Black coach can say things a white coach will not say. And so when I talk to my staff and I'm looking for coaching or mentorships, and I ask them, find your posse, we will pick up the tab for it. If that group doesn't exist, whatever your posse is, if it doesn't exist, we will pay for it. Find your group and we will pick up the tab. because there are times when you do feel, am I the only person here? It might be, am I the only woman in the room? Am I the only black woman in the room? Am I the only person in this demographic? And that really, the weight of feeling like you are by yourself or you're pushing an ice cube up a hill by yourself can be debilitating. I mean, it can be debilitating. So I tell people all the time, if you can't find that group, if it doesn't exist, let me help you find it. And I'm fortunate to be in an organization where they don't question that expenditure, because if our staff is distracted, if they feel not valued, our work doesn't get done. So there is a definite financial cost to staff not feeling recognized and seen and valued.
Well, I'll take I'll try to be quick with my response.
Okay.
So I'm fortunate that I don't have to take on that tremendous burden here at EAH. It is a top-down, bottom-up approach where, you know, folks are engaged and it is in alignment. HR wants it to be across a company responsibility as opposed to one individual that's taking on that burden for the whole organization. I will be, you know, the bee in the air to remind, like, hey, we need to focus on this, we need to focus on this. And then also bringing the team in and engaging. I mean, Mick has his best friend with one of our analysts here, Jacob, who's working on some DEI efforts from within our department, and he has taken that on in a way that I could not have imagined, because I have so many other things that I need to take care of. And so to alleviate that burden, I delegate. We make sure that people are engaged and involved and they're able to shine in their respective ways. And one way I'm able to deal with the self-care is I pray a lot. I go on a lot of walks. I have my groups that I could come to and have those intimate moments where I could share some of the challenges that I'm dealing with and the upliftment that I need in those spaces. And there's so many different groups or people that I could just reach out to and have that space. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Well, we have, is there anything else folks want to share? Anything that I didn't ask that you want to share in this space?
I got
You know,
something.
sometimes sometimes I worry about the term DEI, because we get caught in, you know, buzzwords every few years. And someone asked me once, would I take a DEI job? And I said, so what happens when DEI is no longer the it phrase? Do I get let go? And she said, oh, I never thought about that. And I thought, well, I did, you know. So I caution people to use those kinds of things. And you asked about burden. There are times when people will put together a DEI group, and because I just happen to walk into the room and I'm the lone, you know, person of color, Rochelle, you're on the, as Denise says, that we've got so much other stuff. Sometimes you've got to chase your demons on your own. And you know, I'm not being disrespectful, but I can't be on everybody's DEI committee. And part of the value of DEI is that you see me outside of the time that you are looking to check the box on diversity. You know, I have to have an inherent value to you outside of the DEI workshop. You know, you can still invite me to the cocktail party. Guess what? I don't have to come on DEI day. And so I am very protective of my staff that they're not put in that position either. That, you know, oh, well, I'm going to invite these three because it's Pacific Asian Day. You know, how about you value us the other 364 and you will get a value in return. And so I really want to say I applaud the efforts, because hey, you know, it needs to be done. But be consistent, you know, be authentic. And it reeks of inauthenticity if you are only calling me because you got a panel to discuss. This panel accepted, but I do, and I know you all get that. Oh,
Yeah,
we need
totally.
we need someone Black today. Oh, we don't have someone Hispanic on the team today. And I think, you can ask me back tomorrow. I don't have to only come that day.
Mhm.
So please be very, think it through before you throw the DEI out there. I may not give you the response you were looking for.
Mhm.
I'll go. And from my personal perspective, I've always looked at the affordable housing space as, being mission driven, being a potential catalyst for, economic inclusion, for equity, across the board, and have really appreciated all of your DEI journeys. I'm involved with Azani and Monica Joe from MPH on the diversity, equity, and inclusion working group, and our equity and contracting.
Mhm.
And the thing I'm appreciative of is I've seen the pendulum swing, multiple times, over, the course of my life. And I've seen the George Floyd pendulum swing, but I appreciate that it feels like for the housers that that may have also been a pivotal moment, because we would see different types of questions in RFPs, and we would a different type of look, and it doesn't feel like that it was a moment. But I do really feel and hope, and maybe I could be wrong, Rochelle and Denise, but that it's been an addition to your movement, and and appreciate being on the journey with y'all, and y'all helping to lift us up, as the
Mhm.
construction industry, and challenging us to be better. So uh, want to add that, and um, I think about that, and yeah, so thank you.
And I just appreciate the MPH and the stat and the SCAMF team coming together on this and just keeping the conversation relevant. It wasn't just a 2020 event. It has
Mhm.
been ongoing, so I do appreciate that. It keeps us it holds us accountable to our commitment. And it's a matter of us to embrace it and grow from there. And so I just hope those who are on this call can participate in the conversations and keep this moving within their organization and challenge their own biases, because we know we all have them, and just seeing how we can continue to grow in this space. So thank you.
Mhm. Thank you. Nick, Denise, Rochelle, thank you for this really rich discussion. I really appreciate the authenticity that you brought to the panel. I know the chat is popping off and there's questions. So I want to hand it off to Danielle so that we can get some Q&A from audience members. I know there's quite a few. Okay.
Thanks, Miriam, and thank you for moderating. Thank you, Rochelle, Mick, and Denise, and Rami, obviously, for all presenting earlier, Azani and Ariana. It's been a really insightful, great discussion, and I know that the chat and the Q&A has been echoing those thoughts. So I'm just going to get started in the Q&A. And this can kind of be for everyone, or, well, actually, it looks like some of these are directed for Mick, but everyone can chime in if they have any thoughts. But the first question is, Mick, can you tell us the underrepresented groups you work with again?
Yeah, so I think from the admin side, and it's probably the same on the craft side, our trade union workers, when I say underrepresented, it's based on on a group's population. So they could be African Americans, AAPIs, LGBTQ plus folks. I would say that um, those three, what I would consider underrepresented in the industry, and by that, just by our population, we're not that. On the craft side, I think there's some targeted kind of demographics, foster youth, women in construction, obviously, returned citizens. I think there's a different kind of demographic mix that, you're looking for in terms of underrepresented. But it's really, about where your group shows up in the population and where they are in the industry.
Thank you. Also another question for you, Mick. Is your mentorship program a formal program? I'm curious, how does this look like?
Yeah, so we are in the process of beginning to formalize it. The affinity program, right? So within the Black Community Business Resource Group, that is probably. I would, it's somewhere in between formal and informal, right? We work to make the matches and set up some criteria, with regards to how often they meet and how often it lasts. But as far as like maybe some reporting back that you would have in a mentorship program or the development in an action plan, it falls somewhere in between. But we really have invested in talent. We have what we call our talent first team, and have someone that our strategic talent partner that actively, as she's developing folks' development plans, looks to pair them with, a mentor that then they have that ongoing kind of dialogue, about how the mentorship's going. So I hope that answered your question.
Thanks. And this last one is also addressed to you, Mick, but I'm going to open it up to Denise and Rochelle as well. You mentioned affinity group and allies. As someone who falls into the latter category, how can we be the best allies possible?
That's a good question. Somebody else want to take it while I think about it?
Well, you know what? I think that all you have to do is ask. There are different needs in different seasons. We've got young in career folks who really could use a mentor from time to time. The work that we do can chew you up and spit you out. You put a lot of time into it, and it's hard to stay up. Sometimes I know that my staff needs to have someone else advocating on their behalf. And it can be work related. It can be, in the space that you have. I believe everybody does not realize the enormous role that they have, the influence that they have, getting things done, speaking on our behalf and being that sponsor in rooms where we're not in means a lot. There are things that you can certainly do. So I would encourage you to, if there is a developer, Mick, any of us that you respect, reach out and say, how can I contribute? There is a lot that we need to do to make sure that our staff feel valued and be beyond the culture of the organization. Having somebody spend, as Denise said, 4 years, 7 years on a project that finally bites the dust is soul crushing. And so making sure that they are valued beyond that specific role. I don't know if that helps you, but it really would help a lot of us to know that we are not dabbling in vain.
And to add to that, as an ally, is just continuing to be supportive, just recognizing who isn't in the room. If there's, again, being intentional. And so I remember on a conversation that we had within the department where one of the staff, not our department, at the company, one of the staff was challenged with the leader of their department saying colorblind. And it's like, I want you to see me. And so I would say, take that lens off and just recognize the space that you're in and seeing who's not being represented and how we can get more involvement in that space. So I'd say keep the conversation going, recognizing who's not in the room, who needs to be present. If there are additional resources that you know of that we may not know of, continue to share, because SCAMF and MPH have a great platform for us to be able to access a lot of research. So I think, as my 5-year-old little cousin now says, sharing is caring. So continue to share what's available and out there for us to grow as a whole.
Yeah, I guess, and only I would say ditto, but show up and speak up. But realize that as an ally, most of the time in affinity group space, you might have to step back. But I think showing up and speaking up, be when you're in rooms, and I have to show up as an ally. When I think about our AAPI group, our Pride group, our Veterans group, that I need to be present there. I need to offer support, but at the same time, I need to be able to step back and follow their leadership.
Thank
So
you.
Glad you said that,
I was
Mick.
going to add just one thing that I also share with folks. I also remind people that I affiliate myself with or within our team, like, I do not have to look like the group that I don't have to look like whoever is the majority in the group. Like, I want to go and learn. I want to understand. So as Mick said, show up. That's one thing. Step back, because I don't know what's going on, and hear the conversation and learn what's going on. So I said, put yourself in spaces where you typically don't go and learn from there.
Yeah, and I love what Mick said about stepping back, because there are times when you're asking about how do we encourage the culture or the conversation. Sometimes the conversation is best when you're not in the room. And I know that there are times when you'll have, like, the men want to get together. In our office, it's all women. And so you've got a couple of men and the men want to get together, and, well, we want to go with them. And no, sometimes you're not part of that. And don't take it personally. It goes back to find your posse. And because there are times when you've got a group and somebody stepped in and you're like, oh, I was trying to have this conversation without the C-suite in it, or without the women there, or without the guys in the room. So just be very aware, because sometimes it takes a group. It's hard for your staff to get together, and they don't want to tell you, don't come. So just try to be sensitive to that, and don't be afraid to ask the question of the one who's not intimidated to tell you, should I be here or should I not? And then just go quietly. It will flip back, and there are times when we're not to be in the room for whatever reason. Just be sensitive to that.
Thank you. We have a few more questions. I'm going to go to one that was in the chat. Basically, it says, keeping your organization and staff continuously engaged and committed to DEI after the initial implementation phase can be challenging and yet essential for sustaining long-term change. How can you maintain interest and buy-in? And they kind of outlined how they integrated continuous learning and development, inclusive leadership, ERGs, they've set DEI goals and accountability. But as they continue to push these initiatives, the staff are losing interest and are tired of having to take DEI courses regularly. So just how to
no one wants a PhD in DEI. I think it's just like, how many sexual harassment classes do you expect people to be excited about? I think you have to get it out there and then move away from it, unless, or just make it part of your overall culture and ethos in the office. If it's always a focus, it does get to be monotonous. And so I think that initial conversation is important, and then weave it into just best practices so that it doesn't become something that people dread.
Thank you. The next question. There was a brief mention of providing regular employee satisfaction surveys. How can we gather feedback while balancing expectation on what we can possibly do or can't do?
I'll take that one. I think the satisfaction surveys were part of Ramey's presentation. Um, so I don't know if we want to bring Ramey back to talk about that, but I think they're key. And the most important thing about the satisfaction surveys is leadership needs to listen to them. Don't just have a bunch of things that you want people to do and then there's never any action on them. You know, people want to see action or the survey becomes useless.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit about what we are doing at Mercy Housing. We have the Glint survey. I actually don't know what Glint stands for, but it is a tool that is online, anonymous. You know, it's very, very brief. And I can't remember the specific questions, but the questions are phrased to really get at, do you as a staff member feel valued in the organization? You know, do you feel like the organization exhibits the values of mercy, justice, and respect? And you know, it's a lot of you know, some may say kind of squishy questions, and it's really a measure of trying to see how people feel, um, if they feel a part of Mercy Housing and part of the kind of big organization and culture. And we have used it as a tool for discussion here in the Bay Area Real Estate Group. And I know my colleagues in our other 2 offices in California have as well. And the staff here took the information and said, okay, like, we are seeing that as a whole, you know, we could do better on and acknowledging, you know, the contributions that we make as staff members. So here are some ideas. Or we see that we could do better um, on balancing, you know, work-life balance. Here's some ideas. So it's been, I think, pretty useful. It is a little tricky, you know, for some people, because some people don't respond well to those kinds of questions. Like, they're maybe a little bit too high level for them. But, you know, I think there's probably tools out there or people out there that can help you fashion a satisfaction survey. And maybe a satisfaction survey is not the right way to call it either. I think we've called it a culture survey. That you know, I think there's something out there that you could probably use that makes sense for your organization.
All right, next question. Can any of the presenters talk about how they are increasing racial diversity within their organizations and avoiding tokenism?
I'll take a swat at that. And I've been thinking about sharing this with y'all, so forgive me if it hits wrong. But I think you got to be intentional, right? You know, for us, because you know the gaps between, like I said, the where the population is in a particular area and a particular demographic group when we're approaching a career fair or when we're looking for an organization to be a part of, be it, you know, a NSBE chapter and the NSBE National Society of Black Engineers. We have to be intentional. And so I sent my colleague, she was the person was covering for me at a career fair, and I said, you know, when you're at that fair, put a focus on, you know, finding women, people of color, LGBTQ plus folks, you know, and getting those resumes and being intentional, you know, with regards to what we're looking for. And so she shared that those categories that for what they were looking for with one of our colleagues that attended, and that person was like, I'm looking for that too. So it's having, you know, that intentional kind of approach and really kind of enthusiasm. I think if you're bringing people through the door, and we usually start people as interns and they move into project engineers, but if you're bringing them authentically through the door and believe that they can be successful, you know, I think in no way that's tokenizing it, but if anything, like my predecessor Rick Moore used to say, you're just opening up the door for someone else, you know, like somebody opened up the door for you.
All right, it looks like we just got one more question in. Are DEI members affinity groups in your companies compensated or purely volunteers?
We don't have DEI groups in a staff of 10. we wouldn't have that. However, I do encourage my staff, like I said, to find their tribe, and we will pick up the tab for those gatherings, lunch, um, coffee, whatever it is, because I also do believe it helps in terms of leadership. And one of the things we're always trying to do is turn our staff into leaders. If they leave us, there's no negative to them being leaders elsewhere with the values that we've brought in. So it's worth an investment. But if we had the opportunity, there would not be a pay. I think it taints the organic nature of it and the authenticity of it. I can't remember what the word is that Denise used, but the whole point of these things is for it to be a sincere gesture. And once there is a price tag on it, it becomes something else. That's my thought. So I'd love to know. I think Denise and Mick have much larger organizations. I'd love to know how they do that.
The DEI members or affinity groups are not compensated. So I had shared with our DEI music video that was done on the staff member. His name is Chris Berger. That was on him. He took that on his own and took photos and was able to he wrote and directed and created that music video that they share with our organization. So it's not a compensation. So I think it's just, and I can't quite call it a volunteer group either, but I think it's just a natural occurrence if folks want to be able to get together. Like, for example, our project managers, before everything shut down, it was organic. They would take time out of their day to just go for a walk and just talk. So they didn't have to be compensated for that.
Yeah, our leadership team, well, nobody's compensated for it. Um, it got me thinking, and then Rochelle, you got me thinking back the other way, in terms of, should it be? And I think I'm landing where you are, Rochelle, after hearing that. But the thing that we do is we do rotate the leadership. So it's not going to be the same people. I think, it's a year or a 2-year term, depending on how they've set up their charter. And then they have elections. And because, if it was a compensated position, I might be there doing a, no, I'm just kidding.
All right, it looks like that is all the questions that we've received. We still have 10 minutes technically scheduled, so I don't know if the audience has any last remaining questions they want to send in the chat or the Q&A, or if any of you guys have anything that you want to share that came up through the discussion or just might have popped into your mind before we end here.
Danielle, I have something. I mean, I wasn't a part of the panel, but I just want to share.
Oh, please go ahead. Please go ahead, Miriam.
I want to go back to that question around tokenism, and as an employer, I just want to say that, no one wants to be someplace just to check a box. And it's so dangerous for organizations to do that. and it causes real harm to the people of color that you hire. And I've seen it. And I think I just wanted to say that out loud. Because, when you do that and you bring people in because, you need, wouldn't it be great to have this leader be this Black woman or this Latina or this Asian, it's just harmful when you do that and you create these positions and you bring these people in that they may not be ready for, and it creates that imposter syndrome for them. And it just, it just causes like such an uncomfortable working environment. So I just, you know, to Mick's point, be intentional about this. It's just so dangerous.
It really is difficult. I have seen organizations that have really set up their leadership to fail because they are bringing someone in to check the box, but don't value the skill set that they bring. And it's an over, I mean, that is when it becomes overwhelming. When you realize that you are there for the press releases and the public statements and you're the face of the organization, but you don't have the voice. I think the way that we do it, and that would go for any member, but in the post George Floyd era, it's I think pretty prominent for people of color. I think that going back to what they started with, investing in your staff, training them so that they can succeed, investing in their success, regardless of whatever shade they come in. That's the way to make sure that your organization is growing and sustainable, which is the responsibility that we have, is to make sure that we are carrying out the mission or the whatever the directive is, the vision that we have for the organization is creating the staff and the people power to be able to make sure that we are living up to whatever that expectation is, if it's profit, if it is housing units, etc. And so you don't park the values at the curb just because you're trying to check the box. People feel it, and it really ripples through the organization, and that is a toxin that you can't easily remove from your culture. And so it's not worth doing it. So if you're not vested in the success of that individual, it really doesn't matter what shade they come in. That should always be the talent that you got. Are you, if they are coming in at a deficit, are you going to consistently bring them up so that they don't get the, that was a, affirmative action hire. People don't use those words now, but they use, there are other words that they use that make it really difficult for you to succeed. So yeah, be mindful of those kinds of things.
Rochelle, I think what the new term I've heard is a political hire.
Thank you for that, Miriam and Rochelle. And actually, we just received one last question. How have organizations at the forefront of DEI decided what constitutes the focus of DEI? DEI has a very large scope: gender, race, place of origin, disabilities, veterans, age, etc.
I can take that one.
Well, I guess my answer, because of my role and my involvement, I'd say all of the above. I mean, I'm trying to support our veterans community here. I'm trying to support, all the various affinity groups, as far as our external efforts, supporting all. So it's, I guess my role's kind of a little different, but Miriam, love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I was just going to share that. I think it depends on your organization and the needs. When we started our DEI work at Saha, we focused it on racial equity. So that was the initial focus. And we said we were going to be intentional and focus it there. And we did that we started it, and then we stopped it. And we restarted it. And so it's just a place that we focused on, and we're continuing to focus on while incorporating all of the other pieces of DEI. But it really just depends on your organization and where you see the need.
And I would say for EAH, it starts with that initial assessment and understanding what we do. As I saw Shanice had commented, in understanding what DEI really means and belonging really means. And then we can grow from there. As I mentioned, when the files or the hiring files are reviewed, they are looking at all of these descriptions that were provided here with gender, race, place of origin, disability, veterans, age, etc. Because like I mentioned, we are in a diverse state between Hawaii and California, and so, but fundamentally, is really understanding what that is, and then making the decision on what it looks like for our organization.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for sharing. Thank you everyone for participating, all the audience for joining us. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.